Here, survival is the only law. There are no heroes, only the desperate and the damned. The city I once knew has crumbled into a wasteland of violence and decay, where the strong prey on the weak and mercy is a forgotten concept. I've seen things that would make most people lose their minds, but nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that awaited in the heart of the ruins. In this dystopian hellscape, you either hunt or become the hunted, and tonight, the hunt is on. I moved through the crumbling remains of what had once been a bustling metropolis, my footsteps echoing off the hollowed-out shells of skyscrapers and abandoned vehicles. The city was a graveyard now, its bones picked clean by scavengers and the desperate. But there were still those who clung to life, who fought tooth and nail for every scrap of food, every drop of water. I was one of them, a survivor. But survival in this world came at a cost, and I had paid that cost 100 times over. The government had collapsed years ago, the last vestiges of order swept away in a tide of violence and chaos. The rich and powerful had fled to their bunkers, leaving the rest of us to fend for ourselves in the ruins of their greed. The cities had become battlegrounds, lawless territories where gangs and warlords ruled with an iron fist. The few who tried to cling to some semblance of civilization were quickly crushed, their ideals burned along with their bodies. I had learned early on that there was no room for mercy, no space for compassion in this world. The only rule was to survive, and I had become very good at it. But every day was a struggle, every moment a battle against the darkness that threatened to consume me. Tonight was no different. The air was heavy with the promise of rain, the sky rumbling with distant thunder as I made my way through the maze of derelict buildings and debris. I kept my head low, my eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The city was full of predators, and I wasn't in the mood to become someone's next meal. My destination was an old warehouse on the edge of the city, a place that had once been a hub of industry, but was now just another ruin in a sea of decay. Word on the street was that a gang had taken up residence there, a group of men and women who thrived on the misery of others. They called themselves the Reapers, and they were known for their brutality, their willingness to do whatever it took to survive, even if it meant butchering innocent people for food. I wasn't one to shy away from violence, but the Reapers were something else. They were animals, devoid of any humanity, driven only by their base instincts. And they had something I needed. It had taken weeks to gather the information, to track down their location. But I had no choice. They had stolen from me, taken something precious, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I reached the warehouse just as the first drops of rain began to fall, a steady patter that quickly turned into a torrential downpour. The building loomed before me, its windows shattered, its walls covered in graffiti and grime. The entrance was guarded by two men, both armed with rusty makeshift weapons, pipes and chains that had seen more than their fair share of blood. I slipped into the shadows, my hand resting on the hilt of my knife as I watched them. They were talking, laughing, completely unaware of the danger that lurked just beyond their sight. It would have been easy to kill them, to slit their throats and move on. But I needed information. I needed to know where they were keeping my sister. She had been taken weeks ago, dragged from our shelter in the dead of night by the Reapers. I had been too late to stop them, too weak to protect her. But I had sworn to find her, to bring her back no matter the cost. I moved silently, my body blending into the darkness as I approached the guards. The rain masked my footsteps, the sound of water dripping from the broken roof covering my approach. I was close now, close enough to see the glint of steel in their hands, the sneers on their faces as they talked about their latest kill.
Fucking easy pickings, didn't even put up a fight.
One of them said, his voice thick with contempt.
Yeah, well, she won't be any use to us much longer. Boss says she's getting too weak. Might as well finish her off tonight. Make room for some fresh meat.
My blood ran cold, my grip tightening on the knife. They were talking about her. They were talking about my sister. I didn't hesitate. I lunged at the first guard, my knife flashing in the dim light as I drove it into his neck. He gurgled, his eyes wide with shock as blood poured from the wound, his hands scrabbling at the blade buried in his throat. The other guard barely had time to react before I was on him, slashing at his face, his chest, cutting him down with a fury I didn't know I possessed. He screamed, stumbling back as he tried to fend me off, but I was relentless. I drove the knife into his stomach, twisting the blade as he collapsed to the ground, his blood mingling with the rainwater pooling around us. I stood over them, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. They were dead, both of them, their bodies lying in the mud like discarded trash. But I felt no remorse, no pity. They had taken my sister, and they had paid the price. I wiped the blood from my knife, my hands steady as I searched the bodies for anything useful. One of them had a key, a rusted old thing that looked like it had seen better days. It was likely for the warehouse, a way inside without having to force my way through the main door. I slipped the key into my pocket and made my way to the entrance, the rain soaking through my clothes, the cold biting into my skin. The door creaked open with a groan, the darkness inside swallowing me whole as I stepped into the warehouse. The stench hit me first, a foul mixture of sweat, blood, and decay that made my stomach turn. The interior was dimly lit, the only light coming from a few flickering bulbs hanging from the ceiling. The place was a maze of old crates and rusted machinery, the floor littered with debris and the remnants of the lives the Reapers had destroyed. I moved cautiously, my senses on high alert as I navigated the labyrinth of the warehouse. Every creak, every rustle put me on edge, my hand never leaving the hilt of my knife. Voices echoed through the building, the harsh laughter of the Reapers as they celebrated another night of brutality. They were close, too close. I could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something terrible was about to happen. And then I heard it, a faint whimper, barely audible over the noise. My heart skipped a beat as I followed the sound, weaving my way through the maze of crates and debris until I found the source. She was there, in a small makeshift cage in the corner of the warehouse. My sister huddled in the filth, her body bruised and battered, her pale face with blood. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide with fear, but they softened with recognition when she saw me.
Jack, you found me. About damn time. I was getting bored at this party.
She said, trying to keep her voice low. She was hurt. I could see it clearer now, but she was still trying to be a badass. I'm here, I said, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice as I knelt beside the cage. I'm going to get you out of here, okay? We're going home. But she shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No sounds of crying coming from her, though. She wouldn't allow it.
No, Jack, you have to go. They're going to kill you if they find you here.
They're not going to find me, I said, my tone firm as I pulled the key from my pocket and unlocked the cage. We're getting out of here, both of us. But as I reached for her, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me, followed by the cold, sharp click of a gun being cocked.
Well, well, well. What do we have here?
I froze, my blood turning to ice as I turned to face the source of the voice. A man stood in the shadows, a sneer on his lips, a shotgun held loosely in his hands. He was tall. Not only that, he looked like he could bench press a bus, and his face covered in scars that told the story of a life filled with violence.
The little hero come to save his sister. How touching.
He mocked, stepping closer, the light catching the glint of metal as he aimed the gun at me. Let her go, I said, my voice steady despite the pile of shit in my pants. This is between you and me. She has nothing to do with this. The man laughed, so abrupt and cruel it made the hairs on my nuts shake.
You really think you're in a position to make demands? Look around you, kid. You're in our territory now. You think you can take what's mine? Heroes don't last long in this world, and neither will you.
I kept my eyes on him, every muscle in my body tensed, ready to react. I knew I was outmatched and outgunned, but I wasn't about to back down. Not with my sister's life on the line. Fuck that. You've got one chance to walk away, I said, my voice low and hard. Leave now and I won't kill you. I had no clue what I was talking about, but fuckface didn't know that. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my threat.
You're a cocky little shit, aren't you?
He took a step forward, the shotgun now aimed squarely at my chest. Great.
But you know what? I've got a better idea. How about I kill you, and then I take my time with your sister? Maybe we'll even keep her around for a while. You know, for entertainment.
Rage flared up inside me, hot and blinding. I could see the sick pleasure in his eyes, the twisted joy he took in seeing my anger, but I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. Not yet. You think you're tough? I snarled, gripping my knife tighter. You're nothing but a shit stain. Oh, and by the way, you guys make the worst fucking neighbors. I don't care what you say. I'm calling the HOA in the morning. It was then when my sister's laughter sliced through the air. His smile faltered for just a moment, confused by whatever the hell was coming out of my mouth and Mary sounding like a banshee. It was all the opening I needed. I lunged at him, my knife flashing through the air. He fired the shotgun, but I was already moving, the blast going wide as I tackled him to the ground. The shotgun clattered away, sliding across the concrete floor as we grappled, each of us fighting for control. He was strong, his hands like goddamned vices as he tried to force the knife from my grip. But I was fueled by pure grade A desperation, by the need to protect my baby sister, and besides, I really didn't want to die. I'll rip your fucking head off and shove it up your boyfriend's asshole, I shouted, driving my knee into his gut. I was aiming for his balls, but I wasn't going to tell him I missed. He grunted, momentarily winded, and I seized the opportunity, slashing the knife across his arm. Blood spurted from the wound, and he gritted his teeth in pain, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I scrambled to my feet, knife still in hand, and kicked the shotgun further out of reach. He was on his knees now, clutching the arm with a deep gash in it, his face twisted in a snarl of rage and pain.
Fuck him up!
Mary yelled from her cage. I'm working on it, I shouted back to her, my eyes never leaving the man in front of me.
You're dead. You and your sister. You're both fucking dead.
He spat, blood flecking his lips. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I knew then enough time passed. My eyes flicked down to the blood pouring from the artery in his arm. With a cold, determined focus honed by years of training, I closed the distance between us, with no hesitation. He tried to grab me, to pull me down with him, but I was faster. I plunged the knife into his chest, the blade sinking deep into flesh and scraping past bone. His eyes widened in shock, a gurgling sound escaping his throat as blood bubbled up from his mouth. I twisted the knife, my hand steady, my gaze locked on his as the life drained from his body. He sagged forward, his strength failing him, and I yanked the knife free, letting him collapse onto the floor. I stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, letting what just happened wash over me. The warehouse was silent now, what was left of his minions scattered. The only sound, the distant rumble of thunder and the patter of rain on the roof. The man lay motionless at my feet, his blood pooling around him, seeping into the cracks in the concrete. It was over. He was dead, but the danger wasn't. I turned back to my sister, who was smiling in the cage now. I dropped to my knee. My hands, still slick with blood, began to unlock it. All the while, her eyes were behind me, assessing for danger. As she stood up, the reality of our survival was sinking in. We were alive. We had made it. But the world outside was still a hellscape, and this was just one battle in a war that would never end. We need to get out of here, I said, my hand on her shoulder. Can you walk?
Can I walk? I'm not saying I'm invincible, but I pretty much crushed it out there.
I nodded, then smirked. Good to see the same screws that were loose before were still just as loose. She was weak from weeks of captivity, but she was a fighter. just like me. We made our way to the warehouse entrance, my knife still clutched in my hand, ready for anything that might come next. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the air cool and heavy with the scent of blood and earth. As we stepped out into the night, I knew that this wasn't the end. The city was still a dangerous place, filled with predators and monsters wearing human faces. But we had survived, and as long as we had each other, I knew we could keep going. I glanced back at the warehouse, the last remnants of the Reaper's reign of terror now reduced to a bloody memory. The man who had threatened us, who had taken from us, was gone. But his death hadn't brought any satisfaction, only the grim realization that there would always be another threat, another enemy waiting in the shadows. "Come on," I said, pushing her forward. "Let's go home." She nodded, then sniffed.
Did you shit yourself?
"Hey, you left me alone for weeks to do my own cooking. My tummy isn't the best right now. Besides, your boyfriend's tree trunk arm squeezed it out of me when he wanted to play on the floor. It was just a little." She cackled like a witch at that.
I mean, sounds exactly like what my post-apocalyptic hero would do.
She smiled at me, squeezed my shoulder, and we made our way back to our shelter. The world was still brutal, still unforgiving, but so are we. We would keep surviving, keep fighting, and keep moving through this wasteland we call home.
Thanks for listening. I hope I was able to create an escape from your daily grind. Follow my channel if you want to take a break from reality with immersive storytelling. Well, until we meet next time.